Okay, so we're up to Siman Shin Yud Ches Sif Daled, and we're halfway through it. We're just actually going to finish off the last line of the Ramah, but it's a very important Mishnah Berurah on this because we're going to be discussing how to make teas and coffee on Shabbos. Okay, says the Ramah at the end, Hagah. Hu adin kol davar kosher, anything which is hard, she'einu roi le'echol, and it's therefore not edible, klal at all, below sharia, without soaking it. The osel ishroisu b'Shabbos, you're not allowed to soak it on Shabbos, to have a gemar melacha, because that is the gemar melacha, that is finishing off this item and making it edible. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Ches, v'hu hadin kol davar kosher, rotzolema, that means, kamoisha kosav v'siman shin chof daled, sorry, wrong line, rotzolema, davar shehu roi le'echol, chai below bishul, something which can be eaten raw below bishul, ach shehu yavish v'kosher moed, just that it's dry and it's very hard. Ad she'einu roi lechol klal mach mazeh below shriya b'chamin, it can't be eaten unless you soak it in warm water. To osel ishroisa, you're not allowed to soak it in warm water on Shabbos. And why? Because it's a gemar melacha, like the Ramah says. To have a gemar melacha, why is it even necessary for the Ramah to conclude this? Says the Mishnah Berurah. Surely it should be also because any davar yavish which has not been fully cooked before Shabbos, you're not allowed to soak it in water. Why do you even need to come on to the fact that it's a gemar melacha? So the point is that the Ramah is coming to teach us the chiddush is that it's actually a deraisa because you're finishing it off. You're now making it edible. Okay, so you're not allowed to be shayris. You're not allowed to take an item which is not edible and to soak it in warm water and thereby make it edible. To osel ishrois, it says in the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Tes, even in a klisheni, for example, you've got hot water which is not in a klirishan in the urn, but you've poured it into a into a jug or something. If it now becomes ready by just rinsing it in warm water, gam hadocha also, even the rinsing is also. V'chanal dag maluach, like we said previously regarding the dag maluach, the salty fish. Okay, here we go. It says the Mishnah Berurah, famous Mishnah Berurah. V'ata nevoah din bishul alei hatei. Now we're going to talk about cooking tea leaves on Shabbos and making tea. Hashayach bekama inyonim l'sif zeh, which is very relevant to many aspects of this sif. Hine, tei b'Shabbos pashut ba'poiskim deyesh b'mishum bishul. It's clear, according to the poiskim, that there is an issue of bishul by making tea or cooking tea leaves on Shabbos. Of a mezid yesh is a skila, of a shogeg chiyuv chatas. And like with any other deraisa, if you do it on purpose, there is an issa skila, and if you do it on shogeg, then there is a chiyuv chatas, a carbon. Valkein yesh li zoy b'moed. And since it's therefore deraisa, the stakes are high, you've got to be very careful with this matter. Of Avinusenu Harabim says, laments the Mishnah Berurah, due to how many sins, Rabim nichshalim by many people slip up on this, and they rely on leniencies which don't exist. And I'm compelled, says the Mishnah Berurah, you see his sense of achrayus, I'm compelled to try and clarify all of this. Hine. To pour from a klirishan on the tea itself, on the tea leaves itself, there is certainly a concern that you might be violating an av melacha. To kaimelon to iru mevashel klipa, that pouring from a klirishan is going to cook a klippa, a thin film of the item you're pouring on, like we're going to say in Sif Yud. And certainly it's going to be a problem if you then take these tea leaves and bring it close to the oven, that was the type of oven, that it's going to actually now become yad soledesbay. That's cooking, and therefore it could be violating the issa of bishul, and therefore it could be an issa of skila. And even if you want to put it into a klisheni, that's also a problem. Because for these kali habishul, things which are very easily cooked, even putting them in a klisheni, you've got a problem. וכל שכן, לפי מה שמבוא בסיב זה, יש דברים רבים קלי הבישול שמספשתם אפילו בהדוכה מקלישני, even just rinsing them from the warm water of a klisheni, even that could cause cooking. אפשר יש בהעולים גם כן חשש איסור דרייסה אפילו באופן זה, even just pouring them from in a klisheni, with warm water from a klisheni, even that perhaps could be a problem of bishul with these very easily cooked tea leaves. Valkain, and therefore, Hiskimu ha'achronim diyesh laras aleh me'erev Shabbos. This is what the achronim suggest you do. You pour on erev Shabbos, before Shabbos, reischin mikli rishon. You pour from a hot kli rishon, kadei sha'al yedei zeh yenikra b'hatei mevushal b'mixas. Thereby, the tea leaves will be considered mevushal b'mixas, somewhat cooked. The iru mavashal kadei klippa, because pouring on top of them causes the kadei klippa, the outer coating to be cooked. V'yehofech be'esa iru esatei heitev b'toich haroschim l'mala l'mata l'mala l'mata l'mata l'mala, and then just make sure you stir it properly, top to bottom, bottom to top, and thereby the sort of all of it has all of the sort of the outer parts of the tea leaves have been cooked because of the iru kli rishon. Better is actually just cook them. Don't pour from a kli rishon onto the tea leaves. Better actually to just cook the tea leaves. And then you've got tea leaves with lots of sort of tea essence, liquid, and pour the liquid into a different kli. And thereby what you have left is cooked tea leaves, and let them dry out. Now once you've got dry tea leaves, you can pour from a kli rishon onto them because they're yovish. They're already cooked before Shabbos. And therefore you've got dry tea leaves left. You've poured out the liquid part of it. You've got just dry cooked tea leaves, and therefore pouring from kli rishon into it is okay, because ein bishul acha bishul, once it's cooked you can't cook again. Even if the tea leaves are cold, because it's the dover yovish, it's not a liquid, and therefore pouring from a kli rishon onto it is allowed. Now the tea essence, the liquid, sort of the tea concentrate which you've poured out before Shabbos, you want to put it back in, no problem, because Moshe Kosavnu Le'el, the dover lach and it's done in mutaloi litnei b'toich klisheni. You're allowed to put a dover lach which has cooled down, which has been cooked beforehand and is now cool liquid. You're allowed to put that into a klisheni roseach, which is very hot. So, for example, you've got your urn, which is the kli rishon, and then you pour into a klisheni. We've got a jug at home which says on it klisheni, and we use that always to make hot drinks on Shabbos. Essence, that if you've got, and therefore you've got a klisheni, and you want to put essence into that, which is the liquid which has been cooled down, which is pre-cooked before Shabbos, no problem. Unless, of course, it's the majority, in which case you're able to do that. So, so putting the cold tea concentrates into a klisheni is okay. Fine. Okay, good. So let's just stop for a second just to say what we've said. So the bottom line is that he has said so far that there could be a suri deraisa with making tea on Shabbos because the tea leaves are kali habishul. Pouring hot water onto them is a sofik deraisa over here because it's going to be cooking kadei bishul, kadei klippa, and therefore you've got a problem. And therefore what the Chavetz Chaim suggests is to cook the tea leaves before Shabbos either by doing iru kli rishon on all the tea leaves very well, and then dry out the tea leaves, get rid of the liquid, dry out the tea leaves, and therefore you've got cooked solid yovish matter, and then to pour hot water on that on Shabbos is okay because you're allowed to do it because it's yovish and it's pre-cooked, no problem. If you want to then take even the liquid essence that you made before Shabbos and pour it into a klisheni, that's also okay. Now let's just take a look before we move on to coffee, a very important footnote. if you look at 51 in the second paragraph, v'sakiyos tea bags. You're allowed to pour from a klisheni onto them. How come? What about cooking the tea leaves, which are kali habishal? He is of the opinion that since iru klirishin only cooks a kadei klippa, a small amount of the outer coating, etc. V'hasakit atzmo hi haklippa. The tea bag itself is the klippa. Me'idach, however, other posting don't like that. Hagon Rabbi Yashiv and says she'ein lahakel b'zeh she'yitokin she'ein lismich lechatchila al kach she'lo yispashal k'tzas yosem ikdei klippa, because maybe a little bit more than the tea bag will actually cook, and therefore you're going into the tea essence itself. So he doesn't like iru kli rishon. He doesn't like pouring from a klisheni onto these tea bags. Okay, now, then he quotes the Igros Moshe. If you jump to the next paragraph, Me'idach, B'shayla Tshuva Igros Moshe, famous Shaila, famous Tshuva of Moshe, Kosav She'ein Ra'im Ma She'einenu Royes, he says there's no problem with tea cooking in a klishlishi, because he says just because it turns a dark color, that doesn't mean anything, because you put it in cold water, it would also turn a dark color. For kolshkein bechamin af she'ein yatzeles ve'lefichach ein lahachme ba'alei atei ela shelevashim beklisheni kashad dvarim. But just to make sure you avoid the klisheni, because if you're worried about kalabishal, ach beklishlishi ein lahachme. But in a klishlishi you don't have to be machme. That's the famous tshuva of Moshe, that there's no bishal in a klishlishi, and therefore, taking a tea bag, according to Rav Moshe, so long as you put it into a klishlishi, which means you've got the urn, which is a klirishin, you're pouring into a jug, a klisheni, and then from a klisheni you put it into a mug, let's say, to drink, and you put your tea bag into there, according to Rav Moshe, you're going to be okay. Now bear in mind, this is only talking about the isurim of bishul. Aside from bishul, there are other issues with tea bags which are not addressed in this simon, i.e. boira and schita. Boira, you've got to be careful that you don't take the tea bag out and use it as some form of sieve, because if you think about it, the bag which contains the tea leaves is like a sieve, and therefore you're straining the water which is coming out of it. It's literally a sieve action, which is classic boira. So make sure you keep the tea bag. If you're going to rely on the Ramesh's tshuva, then you make sure you keep the tea bag in the actual hot drink, and you don't take it out and let it drip out, to avoid a boira problem. And second of all, you've got to avoid schita. That means you don't take a spoon and squeeze the tea bag against the side of the mug, because otherwise you've got a problem of seichet, of schita. But aside from boira and schita, Rav Moshe says that using a klishlishi would be allowed to take the tea bag and put it into a klishlishi. However, other poskim are not happy with that, and they say that at the end of the day, because they were talking about a kali habishal, something which cooks very easily, it's better to make the tea essence before Shabbos, or just to make sure that the water is less than yad soledes, but which is not, for drinking purposes, not that hot. Okay, let's move on in the Mishnah Berurah. V'chein adin le'inyan kafe, and so too with regard to coffee. I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom of the page. V'chein adin in coffee, and so too with coffee. You should avoid pouring from a klirishin onto coffee, unless you know the coffee was properly cooked. Now, most instant coffees nowadays are pre-cooked, and therefore you haven't got a problem. But if you're not sure, then you can't pour from a klirishin, because it's going to cook a kadei klippa, and you've got a problem. Like we said previously, I'm Shuvas Chas Mosoifa, similar to Pesachit Shuvas al Orach Chaim. V'da, the af she'tanu la'aretz michamin al alihati va'kofi imnos nalem me'esmol me'ayim miklirishin. Even though we've said, says the Chofetz Chaim, that if you do iru klirishin before Shabbos on the tea leaves or on the coffee, and therefore you cook them, at least kadei klippa before Shabbos, don't put this liquid on near the oven, because what you did before Shabbos of pouring from a klirishin onto the tea leaves or onto the coffee is only going to cook a kadei klippa of the tea leaves or the coffee. And if you're now putting it near an oven, you're going to cook it properly. It's going to cook properly, so you should avoid that. This, what we've suggested till now, says the Chaim, that we've poured from Iru Klirishan onto the tea leaves or the coffee, and thereby cooking a kedei klippa, etc. Even though we shouldn't protest for those who have this practice, there's actually a better course of action, i.e. that you should properly prepare the tea essence on Erev Shabbos, not by just pouring from a klirishan, which is only going to cook a kedei klippa of the tea leaves or of the uncooked coffee, but rather cook it properly, so that you won't need to pour any more hot water over it on Shabbos. You pour water into klisheni, take it from the urn into your mug, and then take the tea essence and put it into that. And that way you haven't got any problem. And so too in the klisheni you can put cold milk into it, because in a klisheni we're not worried about things cooking, because once these items are cooked already, cholov is pasteurized and with liquid, and the tea leaves we're talking about in the coffee, you've cooked them properly before Shabbos, so there's no problem. Just put things in a klisheni. I will also laris alem klirishan, but don't pour from a klirishan onto the mechudila b'sivzeh or cheshen shelo ein etzoynein. Then bevadai tov, if you keep the tea essence a bit warm, then for sure that's good. To fulfill all the criteria. Now, just let's look at the footnote 32, which talks about instant coffee. For kafe namas, instant coffee. Making a coffee, you've got the urn, and you've poured from the urn into your mug. Says Rosh Zalman, you want to put instant coffee into that, no problem. Because this coffee is cooked, instant coffee is pre-cooked, and therefore no problem. However, top of the next paragraph, he says actually, if the coffee is instant and is pre-cooked, you can actually pour from the urn directly onto the tea essence, the coffee, the pre-cooked coffee essence. Even though he is machmir and only uses a klishlishi, so to summarize, when it comes to instant coffee, Reb Shlomo Zalman, Reb Nissim Karelet say that putting it into a klisheni is absolutely no problem. So you take from the urn into a mug, and then you add a spoon of coffee, no problem, because the coffee is pre-cooked, and therefore not worried it's going to cook in a klisheni. Rav Moshe says the truth is, you can even pour from a klirishan directly onto it. So if you put the coffee into the cup mug first, and then pour directly from the urn, Me'ikar Din, says Rav Moshe, it's actually allowed, because the coffee is pre-cooked. But he does say he always uses a klishlishi, and that's probably just the good rule to do. If you always use a klishlishi, then according to Moshe you can't go wrong, because a klishlishi is not going to cook anything. There are those who still are concerned with tea leaves because they're kali habishal, that if the water is, even if it's in a klishlishi, it's a problem, and therefore they should use tea essence. And the way we've described that, and what I personally do is take a few tea bags before Shabbos, put it in a cup, and then just pour hot water before Shabbos onto it, and then just use the liquid concentrate of the tea to make tea on Shabbos, and therefore you've got no problem whatsoever. Just one final point. Nescafe Gold Blend, and that's I've got a separate shir on Torah Anytime about that in much more detail, Tshuva of Machzor Eliyahu and Rabbi Osher Weiss and Minchas Osher. But just to just very briefly explain the issue, the trouble is with this new edition of Nescafe Gold Blend, you've got a percentage of it which is coffee granules which have not been cooked. They're roasted coffee granules, and you can also have Turkish coffee. And according to some poskim, roasted coffee granules or Turkish coffee are prohibited even in a klishlishi. And Nescafe Gold Blend, because it's got some which has been cooked and some which has not been cooked. So the maskana, according to many poskim, is that for Sfaradim it's okay, but Ashkenazim, you should either use a kli shlishi and rely on the, like we've discussed, and rely on poskim who say that this is either not kalabishal, you can use a kli shlishi, or be strict and use the regular instant coffee without this. Don't use Nescafe Gold Blend, or make liquid coffee essence before Shabbos. Again, you can ask your own posik how to go about it, but there is a debate about that type of coffee. Okay, we'll leave it there.